Today my guest is Ruth Boettcher.
We always said, if you've heard of the uttermost part of the earth, we live 5 miles from there.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today my guest is Ruth Boettcher. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, you have a book called The Reluctant Companion, One Wife's Journey to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a picture of the book. Well, why did you write this book?
I really felt that it was needed to give this message out. Actually, I'd had the book going around and around in my head for about 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And I decided, get this book out. But I felt that there would be someone out there who would need to know this, have this message, to know that if they found themselves in the same situation, that they are not alone. I had been there, but mostly that God would be with them.
You went to Africa because of what?
Well, my husband had an assignment to go to Nigeria, West Africa. And he really, really, really wanted to go. And I was more reluctant. And so, hence the name of the book,
Mm-hmm.
Reluctant Companion.
Okay, and what was he doing over there?
Well, my husband was a part of a translation team. The translation in the Ukele language in Wanakande in Cross River State.
And this was the translation of the Bible?
This was a translation of the Bible that when the senior team person, John Fajan, had gone,
Mm-hmm.
That language had not even been ever written down.
Wow.
So he was working at the translation of Mark. And this was in North Ukele, and my husband was to see if this translation could be used in the southern dialect in South Ukele. So what he did for the first 2 or 3 years was to do a language analysis,
Mm-hmm.
To see whether the northern translation could be used in the southern dialect. And he found that there was an 85% cognate ratio, so that both the northern translation could be used in the southern dialect.
What is a cognate ratio?
That means that, okay, say you're from Texas and I'm from South Dakota.
Okay.
That 85% of what you say, I understand.
Okay.
And that's how it was, so that they knew that the translation could be used in both dialects.
Why was going to Africa so hard for you?
It's just not what I had on my radar. It's not what I had in my head as what I wanted for my life,
Mm-hmm.
and for our life. And I was really kind of a stubborn person, and I just wasn't willing to change at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
I made it hard for myself, and that's one of the reasons it was hard.
And what year did you go to Africa?
My husband got his assignment in 1967,
Mm-hmm.
but we actually did not get there till 1970.
All right. Well, how were you able to go to Africa even though you didn't want to?
Well, I think my husband and I talked about it a lot, talked about it at length. He was very appreciative of the effort that I made, and in return for that, he did everything he could to make it easy for me in any way that he could, and that we would work together as a team.
Well, that's good. And what did you do as part of the team?
Well, I was mostly the support person,
Mm-hmm.
and the wife and the mother, making our home and making it as comfortable as I could,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping us all healthy through cooking and keeping our house clean and that kind of thing. And it wasn't very exciting, because that's the diapers and the meals and the hospitality and everything like that.
Yeah, which seemed like it was sort of unimportant,
right,
probably.
Right. It did not seem important to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't see the importance of the support person.
So the 3 years between the time he received that assignment and the time you left, was that language training or linguistics?
Part of it was linguistics, language
Mhm.
training. He went to UCLA in Los Angeles and received his master's degree in linguistics.
Mhm.
But the other part of it was that the Biafran War was declared.
Oh.
Like one day after he had received the assignment, the
Oh,
Biafran
wow.
War was declared. So all the veteran missionaries were evacuated.
Mm.
And we all ended up in Los Angeles. And then they were able to go back, but they still weren't taking new people. And we were
Okay.
new people, new and green, and
Yes.
they just, because of the political unrest, we were not able to get back we were not able to actually go until 1970.
So did that make you a little more uneasy about going after that war?
You know, I think I had my own personal conflict, and I was so concentrated on that, I wasn't thinking of that specifically, although the stress of our not being able to go was contributed to, well, maybe this isn't such a good thing after all.
Yeah.
But we just continued to lay it before the Lord,
Mhm.
and when it seemed like we wouldn't be able to go, then something happened, then it changed, and we were able to go.
Okay, well, how were you able to stay for 8 years, even though the living conditions were kind of rugged? And how rugged were they?
Well, we always said, if you've heard of the uttermost part of the earth, we live 5 miles from there. And I think too, again, as I said, my husband was very supportive, and we worked together, and we tried to do. He at least supported me in, and was very appreciative of my efforts. I have to say too, I think I was in 4-H, and we lived in a rural area. We grew up in a rural area, and I think that kind of helped us because, learning to bake bread in 4-H and learning to do the cooking that I did, that helped a little bit. And he seemed to be really handy in making things and fixing things and so on. So it was, even though it was rather primitive and rather rugged, we seemed to be fit for it.
Like, what kind of a house did you live in?
We had a cement block house, and it had a cement floor, it had a tin roof.
Mhm.
And I know
But that was noisy during the rain.
it was. It was. And the children would sometimes huddle in bed with us when it rained because it was very loud.
Yeah.
But we did have a running water, and we did not have electricity for the first 2 years. So that was very interesting.
Interesting. So you used candles for light, or?
We used kerosene lamps,
Yeah.
Camping lamps,
Mm-hmm.
some candles.
Okay. Well, what was the hardest thing you had to do over there?
I think the hardest thing was, and as my husband said, the deal breaker was sending our daughter to boarding school.
Oh, that
And
would be
so-
hard.
Yes, and the boarding school was 450 miles away, and she was in 2nd grade, and we did the very best we could, and she did too. And there were very good house parents, and it was a very good school, and it was a very good situation, but we found that our separation was just almost unbearable.
Oh,
So-
I can imagine. Well, what are some of the things that surprised you about Nigeria?
I was very surprised at the hospitality of the people. I don't know why I would be surprised about that, but they had very little. We were there in the 70s, and things were a little bit different then, and people were, and still are to a great extent, don't have a lot, but they're able to. They're willing to share with you whatever they have, and they loved our children. I
Yeah.
thought that was very interesting.
Well, what would you say to somebody going through a similar experience?
I would say, lean on the Lord, trust in the Lord, and do the very best you can. The other thing I would say, after writing through the book, I found 13 journals that I kept. I would say, keep a journal. You don't have to keep a journal every day, but one in 1972, the year that I had my second child, there was one entry in my journal for that year. But I would say that that the Lord will get you through.
Yeah.
And trust in the Lord, and the Lord will get you through. I would also say that there were blessings that I didn't expect. You know, even though I was reluctant and rebellious and really did not deserve any blessings, there were blessings that came to me from that.
That's
from
good.
going. So if you find yourself in the situation, you feel this is something you can't possibly do, you know, turn it over to the Lord. And
Well, sometimes it's when you reach that point that he can work.
that's true.
It's
That's
not
true.
until we just totally give up and say, okay, Lord, I'm putting this in your hands. It's like, okay, now I can do what I need to do.
Yes, I think in all fairness, I have to say, maybe if you feel you just can't, maybe that is something that you have to really think seriously about too. You know, but be sure to talk if you're going because your husband is going. Be sure you talk. You have to talk everything out and be very honest.
Yeah. Okay. You need to make sure it's God's will for you.
And for all this time, even for 30 years, I felt that I was a failure because I hadn't really done anything. I had gone with my husband, but I had basically washed diapers, cooked meals, and taken care of children, and I didn't think that was very important. But when we went back to Nigeria, I saw that there were some things that I had done, and that the church was still growing. And then when I had found 13 journals, and in looking through the journals, I thought, I did that, I did that, I did that. So I was like the 60-something person looking back at what the 20-something person had done. And I could say, yes, I really did that. And then I didn't think it was important to be a support person. But now that I've written the book and my husband has been the support to me, I can see that it's very, very important.
Very.
Yes.
Right. Well, what life lessons did you learn in Nigeria?
I think that what I was surprised about is that this is not something I would have sought for myself. You know, it would have been the last thing in the world that I would have thought of doing. But the satisfaction that came to me is something that I would probably have never received in anything else that I sought, which was that was a very big surprise to me. And
Wow. Well, you're a nurse, so did you get to use your skills in Nigeria?
yeah, it was kind of like I was kind of like the last resort because I had small children. I didn't really feel it was fair to work, but we lived on the clinic compound, and when the clinic was closed, people came not realizing that clinic had closed. And so there I was in my little house preparing my meals at the back door so people would come to the back door. And so by default, I became the emergency nurse, and I was really able to help some people, children who were had very high malaria fevers. And there were some other things that I was able to help with, a tetanus baby that actually survived tetanus,
Wow.
and a baby with malnutrition. And
Isn't that the most pitiful thing? Oh.
and these are very, very serious illnesses that people usually do not survive. And so that was.
And they survived.
They survived.
Wow, wonderful. Okay, well, what would you say to young people today about the importance of missions?
I would say that there are a lot of people in the world that do not know about Christ. And this is very important. If you have a chance to go, you may be able to bring somebody to Christ by your going. And then, of course, the other things will follow too. I mean, there are people with great needs, people with very little, and you may just be able to do what it is that they need at that point.
Well, where can people find you online?
The publisher is winepressbooks.com, so go to winepressbooks.com.
And look for The Reluctant Companion by Ruth Boettcher, Boettcher. I just really appreciate your stopping in and talking with me about this. And missions is a really important thing for the believer, and I just applaud you for going, even though you were reluctant.
Well, thank you very much for asking me.